In this episode, we'll take a look at the MicPort Pro 2 from CEntrance, which is a USB audio interface for Mac, PC, iOS, and Android. First of all, this entire episode is recorded with the CEntrance MicPort Pro 2. I'm using a Rode NT1 into that, and it's recording to my MacBook Pro. Now, in full disclosure, this review comes from the standpoint of someone who does voiceover, podcasts, live streaming, and things of that nature. We're not really talking about music production here, so if you are a musician looking for a musician's perspective, apologize, this is not the place, you're dismissed. Now, let's go ahead and give you a couple of samples here, just so you can see what this sounds like.
It is an old maxim of mine that when you have excluded the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth.
It is an old maxim of mine that when you have excluded the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth.
It is an old maxim of mine that when you have excluded the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth.
It was easier to know it than to explain why I know it. If you are asked to prove that 2 and 2 made 4, you might find some difficulty, and yet you are quite sure of the fact.
It was easier to know it than to explain why I know it. If you were asked to prove that 2 and 2 made 4, you might find some difficulty, and yet you are quite sure of the fact.
It was easier to know it than to explain why I know it. If you were asked to prove that 2 and 2 made 4, you might find some difficulty, and yet you are quite sure of the fact. So what is this MicPort Pro 2? Really what it is a very small, single-channel, XLR-based USB audio interface that allows you to record to your Mac, your PC, an iOS device, or your Android. And what's special about it from my point of view is that it does some things that most other interfaces of this nature do not do. Let me cover some of those really quickly. So these Jasmine preamps supply between 10 and 53 dB of gain. And the first question I think a lot of people are going to ask, can they drive dynamic broadcast microphones like the Shure SM7B, and do you need a FET head or a cloud lifter? And the answer is no, you don't need those. In fact, the self-noise spec comes in at minus 127 EIN, so from my just subjective listening to things, I would say that's about right. So in some of the samples we recorded, we did use the Shure SM7B. It is a dynamic broadcast microphone. It requires a lot of gain. In fact, it's probably one of the most gain-hungry microphones I've used. The MicPort Pro 2 was able to drive it. We had to go to 53 dB of gain, all the way up to 100%. And what we were doing is we were finding that it was peaking somewhere around minus 6 to minus 12 dB, which is good. I think that's really a good, healthy level. And for most purposes, that's going to work. Now, if you're really trying to loudness optimize your final piece, you may need to do some post-processing where you do loudness normalization. But otherwise, I think it works pretty well. In addition to that, it has a high-quality VelvetSound analog to digital converter. Seems to do a nice job as well, just from a very subjective point of view. Now, the next thing is the thing that gets me pretty excited about this particular device, and that is it has an inbuilt analog soft knee limiter. And so essentially what you can do is you can push your levels a little bit hotter, and it will manage the transients for you, the loudest parts, and kind of pull them down just a little bit to kind of even out your overall voice and get you a great recording straight into your computer or mobile device. So that makes things a lot easier for the mobile podcaster, streamer, or even voiceover artist. And the nice thing about it, it's very transparent too. It's not a super obvious kind of hardcore compressor or limiter. It just sounds very good and it keeps you from clipping and distorting in a really nice way. I wish more products had something like this in it. It's really great to see that the CEntrance does. Now, one thing I should say, there are two versions of the MicPort Pro 2. There is the basic version, which does not have the limiter in it, and there is the L version, which does have the limiter in it, and there's a difference of about $50. Now, from my point of view, I think that $50 is really well spent. So in addition to the limiter, if you are going to push it really, really hard, there is also a safety track recording on the L version as well. That is to say, the left channel goes at the gain level that you've set, and then the right channel, which goes into your computer or mobile device, actually comes in at 12 dB lower. So it's basically a safety track in case things do get too loud. So if you don't want to use the limiter, that's another way you could approach it. Or if you use both of them at the same time, this essentially becomes a virtually unclippable audio interface. Another thing I really like about the CEntrance products, and the MicPort Pro 2 is no exception, is that they are very rugged in terms of their build quality. Anodized aluminum for the main body, It has nice seams, and then the knobs have sort of a rubber coating to them and very nice action. So the potentiometers are very smooth. Looks like they put a lot of effort into the build quality. Really happy with that. Now, where you don't have a knob, you do have switches, and the switches are recessed, which is good from the standpoint that you can't accidentally bump them and change the settings. So that's really nice. It does have a switchable 48 volts phantom power, so you can phantom power any of your mics, like for example, we're doing here with the Rode NT1. And then on the back of the device, it does have 1/4-20 threads, so you can attach it to a recording rig, for example, if you wanted to do that. Now here's a potentially controversial feature, but I think it was actually a really wise feature in this particular case. It has an inbuilt lithium polymer battery. It's rated to last 6 hours if you're not phantom powering. And in my particular test with my Earthworks SR314, which is kind of my voiceover microphone of choice, which does require phantom power, we were able to get 4 hours and 37 minutes of powering time with the MicPort Pro 2. So it has a respectable powering time. Now, the reason that I think it's important that it has an inbuilt lithium polymer battery is that makes it much more mobile. And I think some people are concerned about that from the standpoint that, hey, this becomes e-junk as soon as that battery stops working, right? Well, they actually have a battery replacement program, so you don't have to worry about that. You will have to send it in, but they can replace the battery for you. And it's a lithium polymer battery of very high quality. I've had a Mixer Face R4R from the same company for over a year. Actually, I think it's been closer to a year and a half now, and that battery is still going strong. So normally, quality lithium polymer batteries these days have at least a 500 cycle rating on them. So and the better ones typically fall in the 1,000 cycle recharge range. So I think you're going to have a pretty good experience with that overall, and it can be replaced if it ever does go bad on you. Now, there are actually 2 USB ports on this, one for transferring data to your computer or mobile device, and the other is actually for recharging and powering the device. And you can actually power it via USB battery bank while you're operating the device. So it actually gives you a number of options there. So if you do need a longer powering time, that's an option as well. It does send a 16 or 24-bit stream, plus it can record up to 192 kilohertz sample rates to, again, your computer or mobile device. Now, one of the things that CEntrance is known for is the digital to analog converters or headphone amplifiers that they actually have designed for years now. And they have included the AmpExtreme headphone amplifier in this device. It's a great headphone amplifier, sounds fantastic, and it's able to drive headphones anywhere between 16 and 600 ohms rating. So basically kind of the lamest little earbuds all the way up to the best audiophile headphones. In addition to that, there's a knob that allows you to choose how much of the direct microphone you're hearing or how much of the audio playing back from your computer you hear. So you get to mix those if you want to do that. So that's really helpful as well from the standpoint that it gets around the whole latency issue of any sort of USB device, not just this one, and it makes it so that you can actually listen to yourself and monitor back while you're talking without a whole bunch of latency. Or if you do need to hear something coming back from your computer, say for example you're doing a remote interview on a live stream, you can actually mix in some of that as well, so you get a little bit of both. Now this headphone amp can also double as a line output, so if you do need to feed audio to a camera or something else like that, you can do it using the headphone output. We also measured the latency here, at least estimated it, with my iMac Pro and the MicPort Pro 2 connected via USB. And what we found is a round trip latency of 13.5 milliseconds and an output latency of 4 milliseconds when we had it set to 128 samples. So that is actually very respectable. In fact, that is just as good as most of the other high-quality audio interfaces I've used. So it does really well on that front as well. There is also an analog high-pass filter with a switch that allows you to turn that on. It cuts at 130 hertz, and it does that at a fairly smooth, kind of not too radical curve at about minus 6 dB per octave. What does this mean in practical terms? It's a pretty smooth high-pass filter and can help roll off some of the rumble that you might get in certain situations, like with air conditioning or heating. The device is really small and lightweight. Here are the dimensions if you're interested in that. And also, it does come with a 1-year warranty. Now, in terms of pricing, again, there's the basic version, which comes in at $249 US, and then the L version with the limiter and the safety track recording, which comes in at $299 US. So from my point of view, I would definitely go for the version with the limiter. I think it's very fairly priced for what you're getting in terms of the quality of audio it can record to your mobile devices or to your computer. And at the same time, really high quality build There is no such thing as a perfect product, so what are the cons in this case? Well, first of all, we already talked about the inbuilt lithium polymer battery. Some people will view that as a con, and I guess that's fair, but it keeps the size and the weight of the product down and makes it super convenient for travel, and they do have the ability to replace the battery if necessary in the future. Both USB ports are USB micro. Not my favorite. It works, and I've got lots of those cables around, so it's fine, but it would have been nice to see USB-C instead. I suspect that maybe USB-C takes up a little bit more space inside, but I don't really know. Now, there is not a multi-segment meter when you're setting your gain. You basically have one that shows you're getting some sort of level, and then they have a second one that pops on when you hit -6 dB, and then there's another LED for the limiter when the limiter is engaged. So overall, it would be nice to have a multi-segment meter, but this actually is workable. Just thought I'd mention it because I think some people will see that as a con. And then another thing that we already mentioned are the recessed switches. Some people don't like those because you do need a tool to switch them on or off, but you can use pretty much anything that's available to you, including a ballpoint pen. So I don't see that as a real con. I actually like the benefit of not accidentally bumping it, especially on such a small device. But some people, I think, are a little annoyed by those recessed switches from time to time. So I'm really kind of stretching here to find cons. From my point of view, none of these outweigh all of the benefits. So who is this device for? I think the first and most obvious, and in fact where CEntrance has kind of made inroads in terms of market share already with the original version of this, is with voiceover artists who need a mobile solution. So this allows them to take their really good, high-quality voiceover microphone with them on the road with their laptop or a mobile device, and this, the CEntrance MicPort Pro 2, and they're set to record. Now, they're going to have to do something to find a space that's good to record in, but this makes it super simple once you've got all that, and it doesn't feel like a compromise on quality at all. I think another case where this really makes a lot of sense is mobile live streaming. And the reason that I like this so much for live streaming is that built-in limiter. That makes the whole process of getting a nice, strong signal out to your audience while you're live, because you don't have a chance to post-process, a lot easier. And so you're not going to have to worry about clipping by pushing the gain too hard. And so you're not going to get that distortion, but you also get a nice, loud, clear signal. So, and in addition to that, of course, the very high quality preamplifier sounds fantastic. Really good fit for mobile live streaming. And again, anyone that just needs a single input for their computer and wants to keep it small. So it can fit any of those circumstances really, really nicely. I think CEntrance has a pretty nice winner on their hands here. So there's my look at the CEntrance MicPort Pro 2. I hope that was helpful for you. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave those down below. And if you've not already subscribed, make sure you do that. And we'll be sure to get you more great videos on how to improve your lighting and sound for video. Talk to you soon.